issue at CPCA. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it. Just a quick plug for CPCA. We've been pretty active on both those issues in terms of getting member input to what the streetscape projects look like, what the service lanes look like, and the future of traffic on the avenue. And DDOT have been pretty responsible in hearing us. Part of the story though is our members have actually fairly mixed and diverse views, so it's an interesting situation for us as an organization. But if you want to learn more about what CPCA has been working on in that regard, please check out our website if you haven't already checked it out for our prior comments and that sort of thing. Last major issue for tonight is going to be public safety issues. We've got a lot of people here. We've got Councilor Frumin who would like to speak to these issues, as well as Captain Haskins and Lieutenant Robinson, and Robin Halsband, who's from our safety committee, who's much more familiar with this particular topic than I am, is going to take over this session. Beforehand, I just want to also thank her. Sorry, Robin. I wanted to thank her for all her work on safety, and also want to especially thank Alice Kelly, who put a tremendous amount of work into putting the session together for tonight. So thank you very much.
Hi everyone, yeah, my name is Robin Halsband, and I co-chair the CPCA Crime and Public Safety Committee with Elizabeth Frenchy, who couldn't be here tonight. And I think a lot of us are here for an issue that occurred this week, and for those who aren't aware, it was on the listserv, but I will tell you about it, and I really appreciate Councilman Frumin is here to discuss it, as well as our MPD officers. And I know the person who reported this on the listserv is also here. I will not call her out, but if she's comfortable presenting herself, I think people would love to hear from her too. But so there has been an issue at the Wells Fargo ATM on Wisconsin Avenue with a man exposing himself. And there have been several complaints, including from this person who spoke to the police, and Wells Fargo has complained about this. And it's just another issue that's happening more and more in Cleveland Park that's leading to a sense of disorder, a sense of safety, and we understand there are other parts of the city that are having far worse issues than this, but it is leading to some real concerns, and these sorts of events can multiply over time, and it's really causing concern for people, and especially when someone feels like, when we feel like we can't get the attention it needs, that's when it really causes concern for us. So I'd really love to hear from MPD, but we'll start with Councilman Frumin, if that's okay. I know his office has been working on this. Elizabeth has been in very close contact with you all, and so Councilman, could you come up and maybe, I know you have some thoughts to share, and then we'll go to whoever, I know we have several MPD people here, but I'll let you guys choose who's going to speak.
All right. Thank you very much. So I guess I've touched this issue in a couple of different ways. I followed the listserv, so I saw this when it first came up and have followed it in that way. I also, during the summer, I was coming back from a swimming pool and stopped to go use the ATM and saw the person in the vestibule turned around and went to another ATM. I didn't realize that it was as persistent of an issue of this person being there as it has been. This episode, it exposes some, in a bad word, but there are a lot of issues out there around this. I've met with businesses in that same area recently, and it's a different issue, but there has been concern about aggressive panhandling that happens around at the entrance to the Giant, and the impact that that's having on people and having on the businesses. And so there's the question of how to deal with that, and there was. We're trying to work with MPD, and MPD has a big job with short staffing. There was also a sense then of MPD didn't know what the answer was or how to solve that issue. And then we have this, which is pretty traumatizing, and it turns out not the only time that there's been an episode like this. Some of the communication around it has been unfortunate. I think there was a report that the person may have not left the scene, so there was no police report. And then I've seen suggestions that to the extent a person exposed themselves, it may not have been intentional. And so what does that mean? and it's a hard one. The police are not equipped to deal with these kinds of situations, and they're trying to do the best they can in this setting. There's also been some reports, there was a claim Wells Fargo said the police should be able to remove this person at any time. But was that communicated in the appropriate way? Was it done in writing in the kind of formal way that it needed to be done? Everywhere along the way, the challenges of dealing with these kinds of situations gets revealed. But where we are is people feel like they can't use their bank. People feel like when they go shopping to the Giant or to Proper Topper that they can face aggressive panhandling, and it makes it unpleasant for them to do that and harms those businesses. And what we really need to do, this is bad, and we need to address this, but we need to figure out how we're going to work together to deal with these issues so that folks like this get help. The police are at a loss as to what to do because the tools they have aren't the tools that are needed here. But we need to be working together to figure out how we can make sure that that person gets help, and certainly that they're not in that vestibule and making taking away from the quality of life of everyone by just using that space. And whether it doesn't really matter if it's inadvertent or not, that we can't have that be happening. But what's the solution? Is it MPD that's the solution? Is it someplace like Friendship Place? What do we do so that we can address this? Because we got to address this. And MPD, it's great that MPD's here, and I'm going to turn it to MPD, and then I'll be interested to hear what people are saying. But we got to figure this out in a different way, and not necessarily. We need MPD's help, but we're going to need help from other entities as well if we're going to make this thing work. So can I turn it over to the folks from MPD, and then maybe together we can answer questions and respond.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you to the Park Citizens Association for having us here. My name is Darren Haskis. I'm the captain for the sector of the second district, or the sector of the city. I'll talk about first with the ATM vestibules. So I share your frustration in that you have somebody living in, sleeping in, doing too many things in an ATM vestibule. Unfortunately, when we get called to these locations, there's not whomever is in charge of the property there to tell us he or she is not allowed here. You can certainly infer it, but what we have found is we need, since it's private property, we need a managerial representative to say, this person's not supposed to be here, I want this person arrested. It would be akin to somebody being in a restaurant, the restaurant manager does not want the person there. Well, we want, as long as the management feels that way, and the person has no choice but to leave. It's not even, can't be like any employee, it can't be like a waiter or something like that. So, without the managerial representative on scene, we either have to make a phone call or something like that, and it's hard to find somebody 24/7 who can give us that go ahead to make that arrest. So we just need consistency and an agreement with business saying, hey, all people between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. if they're not there, go in and out and just get their cash, make the arrest. But without that, it opens up us to civil liability. I'll answer questions shortly. So if an assistant manager says, no, I was good with it. Then we're kind of, well, if the assistant manager is good with it and, another person was not good with it, we need that consistency. So without that, it's not easy to make these arrests without the business being open. Continuing on to the indecent exposure, or the report of this, if you are the victim of that, please call 911 and report that every time. And we will investigate it as we are investigating this with a detective and so forth. With that, I can answer any questions.
Yeah, can we, maybe we'll open up to questions. I'm going to take liberty as a moderator. Just, can you respond to the fact that there were police reports filed, and apparently the head of that branch said that he's asked for him to be removed? So it sounds like he did have the authority to remove that person. That seems to be some confusion.
So, yes, if the branch manager is there and he is authorizing the removal should be done. I don't see any issue with that being done. If it's not being done, then that's an issue I would take up. But that, from my understanding, that is not the case, and it's outside of business hours, and they don't have a managerial representative that can say, this is good to go.
All right,
So, I mean, one of the things that I've heard is that there may have been oral statements that this person should not be able to be there, and I believe that Bazzuto has done things to say generally that person should not be on the property. But, and I know the frustration of the idea of them being subject to liability, but part of what I've been hearing is that they needed, if there's not a person there who has the authority to say it at the time, they need it in writing. Well, I think you'll have it in writing tomorrow. I certainly hope. But that's the part of the difficult position that they're in, and it's fixable. We now know that that's the kind of thing that's required, and we should make sure that we deal with that. But it's not bad faith on their part that they didn't act in this setting because they felt like they didn't have all of the ducks in a row in terms of what their authority was in this situation. Let's make sure that their ducks are in a row in terms of authority in a situation like this.
I'm going to bring the microphone around too.
I'm a bit confused. Does it require that each time the person comes in to get a separate contact, or can it be just a blanket authorization by the bank that says this person shows up, he's ready, you're pre-authorized to remove him? Because you seem to be saying that each time someone has to contact the manager. That doesn't make sense.
That's a good question. Let me clarify. So if there's one particular person that they don't want at their location, they could do a barring notice.
Right.
And that person, for however long, is barred from that location. I do not know of a barring notice in this specific instance that we are speaking of.
But that can be done.
Of course. Good question.
I have a question about, obviously, if MPD arrests them, they take them, they get booked, they get released. Are there non-law enforcement opportunities the city could have, behavioral health, or I think Matt mentioned Friendship Place, and how can we engage them?
Yeah, the officers in this case did contact the Department of Behavioral Health, from my understanding, according to the reporting I've seen. But they're also useful in these situations because many times there are behavioral health issues.
Can I ask, is that CRT, Critical Response Team, is that the same thing? Because we've talked about this at other meetings, and is that the same group, or is there another group?
They are part of the Department of Behavioral Health.
So I know we're sometimes told people should call them directly. I don't know if they come. And I think where the frustration is, it's up to, that it has to be up to us to figure out who to call. And that's where, I don't expect to know whether someone should be at CRT or arrested. So that I feel like is a frustration as well. So
Also a good question. I'll try to clarify that as well, and also give the council member an opportunity to also clarify. If you ever feel unsafe due to somebody or whatever issue, behavioral or otherwise, I advise that you call 911. If somebody is out there, they look like they need help, they're not acting, they're very erratic, I think a call to CRT, as long as they're not harming themselves or others or in that kind of position, can be appropriate.
Could I ask to put something, if you want to talk about this a little bit longer, but I'd also like for you to address the issue of, within the last week and a half, a caretaker down Macomb Street was threatened at gunpoint at 10 o'clock in the morning. And given the traffic on Macomb Street, that's a pretty troubling thing to happen at 10 o'clock in the morning. And he was traumatized. He's worked there for 23 years, never had anything happen, and this happened within the last week and a half.
Okay, so I will touch on the CRT issue and then try to touch on that. So if you call 911, the dispatcher, if it is, it can make its way to a CRT team if that's what is the relevant response in the setting. A challenge is, just like there is a shortage of MPD officers, there's an even more acute shortage there, so that you have CRT teams and the wait time and the response for a CRT team, it can be pretty long, and hours. And so it's not as satisfying as it needs to be in terms of a response. This is one where it's no mystery. This person's been there, I saw him this summer, you all see him all the time. We know it's an issue. This is a place where a friendship place, a Miriam's Kitchen, people who are doing outreach to the homeless, trying to find solutions for those people. We need folks like that focused on this person so that it doesn't have to be the MPD answer. And so that's a thing that our office will be working on. The Macomb Street incident, I won't speak to the specifics of it, but we have had more crime, violent crime with threats with a gun, stabbings, shots being fired in recent times than any of us have experienced. And it is traumatizing in that setting, and it's traumatizing generally. And this is the biggest thing out there, and we need to be figuring out how we can respond to that so that we are not in this place where people feel less safe than they have ever in Ward 3. I mean, I lived in the district through the worst of times, and it wasn't as bad in Ward 3 then as it is now. It's a serious, serious issue. We need to be working closely with MPD. We need to strengthen MPD in order so that they can respond. We need to encourage folks from MPD to be out on the street forging relationships. It's a challenge in the staffing environment that they're under right now. There's a whole long list of things that we need to do, but what we can't do is pretend like it's not a serious problem. And I know I and my office are constantly looking for things that we can do to try to recreate the sense of safety that people have had here. It's hard. The conditions all around us are difficult. That's not an excuse. This is my biggest job to respond to all of you, and I'm going to do everything I can. Part of that is helping to support MPD, and then I'll give it to you to respond on the specific episode.
Thank you, Councilmember. Yes, and MPD does need we have been a little short-staffed, so in terms of the robbery at Macomb, it is it was definitely jarring to hear about it, but it is a relatively isolated incident. The police service area numbers for most of what encompasses Cleveland Park, basically north of Macomb Street. The robbery numbers are similar to last year and to the year before, actually. Where they're really different is in the thefts, motor vehicle thefts, theft from autos, and the retail thefts. And as jarring as that incident with the gun on Macomb Street was, we've had a few other gun incidents. Brandywine Street, there was the carjacking. We had a robbery further up on Connecticut Avenue that we closed. So the numbers, though, are not very different from last year. If I bring up my printout for the police service area, and this is 203, year to date, 2022. At this time last year, we had 14 robberies. This time, this year, it's 13. Now, we are up on assaults with deadly weapon, about 33%, 12 this year, as opposed to 9 last year. And we're up 25% burglaries and way up in other thefts. And that's actually where a lot of our recent initiatives have been focused on, is thefts. And we've had a few retail theft operations going at the Target and at the CVS's. And although the newest initiatives are only 2 weeks going, the initial results are very promising so far, but this is way too early for me to speak of any success. We've had several arrests in regards to these. So, next question.
Can I?
Sure.
Thank you. I've lived in this for 10 years, and multiple here have lived longer than I have in this area, and I don't think I'm exaggerating that this is the worst that I've seen in this part of the city, and the city in general. It's not the same how it used to be before the pandemic. But I also live in the Macomb house, as Pat, and I'm not asking for a detailed answer, but can you just highlight what's the procedure when after a robbery? What does the police do? There are 27th and Macomb Street. It's a dead end. There's the Indian ambassador's residence. Do you go ask for camera footage from them? And then there are houses. Maybe those houses have ring cameras. Do you go and knock on those doors and ask for that? Or in the intersection must have cameras too. And was that car stolen, or how? Can you just briefly just give us a summary of what happened? Because it seems to me that there's a handful of repeat offenders who maybe get slap in the wrist, and then they get released or not prosecuted, and then this thing just keeps getting.
Sure. So I think there's 2 parts to that question. So procedurally, in a nutshell, for you all with police criminal procedure, although I used to teach it a few years ago. So 911 call, there's a response. A robbery just happened, it's going to be a quick response because it's a robbery. It's not somebody broke into my car. The response then sends out a lookout for all the officers. They flood the area looking for whoever may have done this. That's why it's so imperative for these calls to come out very quickly. So if you are a victim of a robbery, we need to know very rapidly while the person's still in the area. It's very, it is kind of disconcerting when we go flood the area looking for somebody and then the person, oh, by the way, it happened an hour ago. And we're like, okay, the person's long gone. But that doesn't mean investigative procedures don't continue. We have a detective back here who could very much attest to, they go through camera footage. The Macomb Street robbery, we got the camera footage. We saw it happening right on camera. So based upon that, the the detectives do their detective work, checking back cars, getting tag numbers, seeing description of cars, was a similar vehicle used in other robberies and so forth. In terms of arresting, rearresting, unfortunately, we do rearrest many offenders here in DC. And that is just how MPD doesn't have much control in who gets held, who gets released, how long they do, and time, and all sorts of things. Question?
Yeah, I'll preface this by saying I spent 2 years as a prosecutor, so I'm pretty familiar with the criminal justice system. And I'm amazed to hear you say that you need the property owner's permission to arrest someone who's been credibly accused of a serious crime. That's the first I've ever heard any police officer make that assertion. But I want to make another point, and council members should be aware of this because you said you read the solicitor. Your officers falsely reported that the complainant they interacted with for approximately an hour and a half left the scene before they arrived. The 911 complainant left the scene, and your police officers reported that. That was reported to Alan Henney, who's a reporter in the city, by one of your spokesmen. And no report was filed. And that's frankly, that's a lie. And I'm sure there's a lot more examples of this kind of malfeasance on the part of the MPD. I'm appalled that our tax dollars are going to a police force that is this poorly run and this poorly, has such low standards that they will allow this kind of thing to happen.
Thank you for the feedback, sir. In terms of unlawful entry arrests,
What's an unlawful entry, indecent exposure? He keeps acting like this guy was just loitering in that vestibule. He exposed himself. An incredible complaint was made by a person who interacted with the police, who acted like they had no idea they could arrest the guy, and questioned her integrity or in her veracity in her making this report. And I'm just appalled.
Sir, if you allow me to finish. So there are two parts of this. There's the unlawful entry, of which the issue has been brought up repeatedly. Yes, and then there was the other issue of indecent exposure. Indecent exposure, I assure you, is being investigated. What was reported initially by a Henninger or to some other person, or what the officers initially said, I can't speak to that. I don't. This is the first I've heard of that. But
read the list, sir. It's very clearly stated in here. I can show you the receipts.
I appreciate seeing that. Questions?
I wanted to ask about the Uptown Theater, because it seems to me it crosses through a lot of the themes tonight of promoting economic development, of art, of keeping homeless folks from living in front of the theater. So I haven't heard an update on the theater recently, and I think it would bring such, a new life into the strip here. So thank you.
The theater's owned by the Pettis family, the old Circle Theater folks, and I reach out to them periodically to ask them what is happening, and they say something is happening, but they can't tell me specifically what it is. I think that we should be learning more about what's going to happen there, maybe by the end of the year, but yes, it would be great to fill in that blank in the corridor, and it's exciting to think of the different ways in which it might be lit up, where it could be a center for the arts or something like that, but we don't. What we know is there is some activity, but we don't know what it is. And I ask them once a month, and they're going to tell us all when they're ready to tell us all, which hopefully will be soon. Yeah. And then first year, then.
Man, conversations with Wells Fargo Corporate after this issue became apparent on listserv. They have indicated that their plans are to close that branch in February of 2024. The decision hasn't been made yet as to whether the ATM vestibule will be left there, even though the office behind it isn't. What I understood from the captain, you need an order from the manager of that branch to deal with this individual. Is that correct? A clubbing order or something?
They need some sort of formal authorization. If there is a vestibule, but there isn't a branch behind, then they would need from Wells Fargo corporate to say.
Definitely welcome contact from Wells Fargo corporate.
Yeah, and
If
we
I can have his business card to get your name and number.
okay, and then also it may we don't know. We've been asking about this report about Wells Fargo closing. I think it is going to be closing. I just went the other day to the Wells Fargo across from the Wilson building and was surprised to see that it had closed and directed me to other branches. So we don't know whether that closure is related to these events. It sort of seems like it probably was a thing that was in the works already, but it's distressing that if it's not that business that's closing because of things like this, it's another business that's closing because of an environment that feels hostile to them being able to thrive.
It's activity because they have a branch down in Calvert in Wisconsin, and then they have a Chevy Chase branch. So due to business activity, it doesn't leave and support that.
Right,
And
and
they
they-
don't work for the bank, by the way.
And they, the one in Palisades closed, yeah, that kind of reshuffling. But we need to figure out a way to make sure that if this arises in the future, that they feel like they have the authorization to act. And so there's no, fool me once, but fool me twice, we got to make sure that we don't have something like this again. This will
This is a naive question, I hope you'll forgive me. But when I walk by the Uptown Theater and I see someone sleeping in the vestibule, does that person have a right to do that?
Well, I don't think that they have a right to do that, but then it's a different question of whether he has a right to do something about it. He would, what the MPD is telling us is, before he goes and says, you can't be here and I can arrest you, he needs a notice from the owner saying nobody's allowed to be there, and if somebody's there, you have the authorization.
So are you gonna ask for that when you talk to them the next time, so that we have a blanket, so that when we walk down Connecticut Avenue, people are not sleeping in front
So
of them?
I'm getting maybe just a tad out of my depth as to whether or not you can do it in that kind of a general way. We today, Lee Catherine Miles from my staff was digging into all of this today. We had a legislative meeting, we had a breakfast, then a meeting, and then another one that just ended. It didn't seem like there was anything controversial, but we need to dig further into this in terms of exactly what we can do in this setting. Kevin has.
Thank you, Councilor. A very good question. This is the first I've heard of the Uptown Avenue investigating sweeper or somebody who's not supposed to be there.
They're on the sidewalk, they're on the public sidewalk.
Okay, if they're on the sidewalk, it's totally different. If they're inside a location, nobody could just sleep in your vestibule. Nobody could just sleep in your front yard. Nobody could just sleep in your front steps of your house. What ordinarily happens is we get a call, please remove this person from my home, from my business, whatnot. But it's rare. We sometimes get businesses who say, we don't want the person there. So, that's why we need the permission to do that.
We got time, I know you have to leave, Councilman Griffin, so we're gonna have to do 2 or 3 more questions.
So my question to you is, a couple weeks ago, I lived at 3901 Connecticut Avenue, right there at Hilton. It was a beautiful Friday out, and I went to go in my car, and the garage takes a little bit of time to open up, and my hands were full. And the message I'm clearly hearing is resources are limited, so you don't know. As I looked at these couple guys, the way they were parked, their trunk was up against the contractor's front. I kept on looking, they sped off. And then I went to that contractors and they broke it into window. My question to you, if we think there's something going on, I mean, do we, resources are limited?
No, if you don't need to prove anything, just call if you see something suspicious. That's our job to follow up with that. Sometimes it ends up being a very good lead. Sometimes it just ends up being a misunderstanding.
So, and this is a thing, you know, the captain talked about crime numbers, and there's a different feel. I mean, there have been robberies before, but the number of stabbings, the number of gunshots fired, it just feels different. And in this space with the contractors, it's not that it's never happened before, but it's clearly this a big thing now of robbing contractors' trucks, and it's a very lucrative business, and there appear to be rings that are engaged in this, and it is distressing that that is happening. And it's not, it's always been the case. I was an ANC commissioner for 6 years, and the biggest crime was folks not even breaking into cars. They go up and down the streets looking for a car that's open that has something there, and the idea that there were people out there who were doing that they were checking all of the cars in the neighborhood was distressing enough. But now you have this thing in the middle of the day where somebody pulls up to a contractor's truck. It's distressing and it's a big thing. I hear the criticism of MPD, I hear the criticism of me. When we're in a situation like this, people are unhappy with everybody whose job it is to protect them. And that is totally valid, and it sits on our shoulders to do the best that we can. MPD actually has been doing quite well lately. The investigations, what are the steps that they take? We don't know all of the different steps that they take because they're not going to tell us when they're in the middle of it, but they actually have broken up a number of different rings in the last couple of months and that's important progress. And so these things, if you see somebody who you think is setting up to take something from a contractor's truck, immediately let them know, because they're putting the pieces to the puzzle together, and they do succeed at it, and it does make a difference, but they need your help in order to make that happen.
Because clearly we should engage them.
You should not. I mean, everybody will tell you. There are no capes and tights in this room. Cameras, but not capes and tights.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions?
I have a comment. I mean, first of all, we all appreciate the job that PD does, and we know that job has become more difficult with rising crime and resources that aren't where they should be. And to Councilmember Frumin's point, what feels different is it's not just the increase in crime and where it's happening, but it's when it's happening. It's the brazenness of it. It's someone being robbed at 10 a.m. on a well-trafficked street. It's someone brandishing a gun as they remove persons from cars on another residential street, also during the day. It's the number of crimes and other incidents happening in Cathedral Commons, which after all is in the backyard, really the front yard of 2D. So it's that brazenness added to the increase in crime. And as to whether your statistics show that robberies in the area have been flat or increasing, I think the question of the police report in this incident that happened at the Wells Fargo Bank goes to the point of whether the statistics, can fully be relied on. The council member needs to rely on those stats just as well. And, what we hear is that people need an effective, efficient way to make police reports and know that these will be recorded and hopefully acted on. Thank you.
We appreciate that, yes, and we do share your sentiment, and that accuracy lets us do our job.
Do you have time?
Yeah, and Ruth Ann had her hand up over here, and then you, and then maybe I probably should go.
This is just a quick question. First of all, I want to thank you both for your dedication and hard work, all of us. This is on a personal note. My daughter's car was just broken into last week on a residential street, and she's done everything she can to communicate to the police, and she has her laptop was stolen, but she had one of those track your laptops on it, and she tracked it for the police, but it went to Maryland. And then there was a big issue as to who could follow up, Maryland or DC. And so I'm curious what the policy is on that. And also, she's heard there were like 5,000 odd or death crimes already in the city, something like that. So are the police just kind of like don't not care about those kind of crimes because there are other more important crimes?
We care about all crimes. So the procedure for, if you're tracking something that goes into Maryland, we can't track, our patrol cars don't go into Maryland to look for property, don't look for cars and stuff. We let Montgomery County or Prince George's County or Frederick County or whomever is up there about it. There was a similar case about a month ago where a stolen car from DC was found in Hagerstown. So that's what the procedure is. Detectives though can go into the suburbs and as part of their follow-up investigation, and they routinely go into the suburbs to do their follow-up investigations. But in terms of patrol vehicles, they don't ordinarily go into Maryland unless there's some kind of fresh pursuit, hot pursuit kind of thing. And they are actively followed up on, investigated, but that's also something where we try to also do a lot of outreach, a lot of preventive stuff. So, and I'm not always good at this. I live in the city, and I'll admit I left my cell phone in the car and stuff overnight. What you want to do is make sure we don't want to give the thieves reason to break into vehicles, and and I don't want to blame the victim, or I don't mean to do that at all. But if we just make the cars with no visible property, that will do some preventive measures on that. But I'll give you my card if you want to see what the latest status is on the investigation.
Thanks a lot.
Michelle. Okay, I'm Michelle Kerner. I'm the listserv poster and the 911 caller from the Wells Fargo incident. I appreciate everybody's time. I've talked to lots of police officers since Thursday. What is most striking to me is the protection of the suspects or the criminals, potential criminals, I don't want to call anybody names, to the detriment of public safety. I don't know how that can be turned around so that public safety is the priority and that people reporting on a Thursday afternoon when really all I wanted to do was go home and watch The Golden Bachelor, that I was kept there and questioned many, many times. Not only questioned to say what I saw, questioned whether it was true, and what I saw was what I saw. And then the person stayed there, so that it could have happened to anybody else. And I do know that it seems to be that once someone gets away with something, they're more likely to do it again, and maybe worse. So I don't know, I mean, you guys have a very difficult job. I don't know how we can turn it around so that public safety is the priority, not protecting someone who may or may not have some mental illness, who may or may not be on hard times. I get all that. But the reason why I posted it was because he was still there, and I don't want it to happen to you. It was really unpleasant. I didn't make it up. I didn't make it up.
Aren't there
I didn't want to be
cameras?
there. I didn't want to stay on the sidewalk of Wisconsin Avenue from 7:15 p.m. until 8:45 when the officers told me I was allowed to go home. And then, and then I was told, so the reporter was told that the 911 caller, I guess me, left the scene, but I didn't leave the scene. I mean, footage from the police officers on their cameras that I was there. Over an hour of footage that the detective has already watched.
I can't speak to whatever was initially put out. I was out of town until my first day back today. I've started an internal review on it, and your time, I assure you, we value your time, and your being there over an hour is something that will be part of that.
Isn't there a camera in an ATM location? Isn't there a security system that could be easily reveal all of this?
Yes, that's also part of this.
Okay.
Yeah, that is already been spoken about.
So, thank you both very much for your time. One last question. We talked about police and council and a little bit of what we should do as residents in terms of not being too obvious with stuff in cars, and I guess ring cameras, what we recommend by the police over the years. For the merchants, this is the last question. Merchants themselves, I know they're suffering from this, but is there kind of engagement with them about what can be done and how they might facilitate your efforts? Or both sides of the conversation from our perspective as well. There's nothing to talk about tonight. If you have any insights on that?
For the merchants, how they could help with that. So the merchants aren't always, they don't always call us promptly enough. It's frustrating that many times they don't call us until after the person's fled. So I've tried to, and I've personally gone to the CVS across the street and to the Target, and talk to them about how quickly we need it. We've made some arrests as of late with regard to these thefts. That's just one component of all this. I'm not saying we're going to arrest our way out of everything. I mean, back when I was an officer, I probably made 600 or 700 arrests. So that was a different era. So that's just one component, and I assure all of you, I don't bat an eye if there needs to be an arrest made.
So I'm not going to have a complete list of that. If you email me, I'll send you. One of the things is there are programs to support merchants having cameras. There's recent legislation, and I'm going to watch really, Catherine, to nod, about grants to Main Streets or similar organizations to do security, to support efforts at security. There are things that's in legislation now that I'm a co-introducer. I don't believe that it's law yet, but it's a thing that's in the pipeline. There are other things like that. One of the things, and we had to vote on the new chief today, that was one of the things that went on for a while today. The new Chief Smith talks a lot about community policing and getting our officers out of their cars and onto the streets. And that is a really important thing that we need to expand, get back to where we have been in other times. It's hard because of the staff shortage, but there are places, and like I said, I follow the listservs. I know what's happening. Frankly, this area here is an area that in the afternoons we should have an officer who's doing patrols, who's talking to people, and who knows the merchants. And so that's a thing. I hope I'm pushing on an open door. I hope that it's what they want to do if they have the staffing. But getting officers on the street, forging relationships with businesses, with some of the people on the street, and some of that can help. It can help in lots of different ways. I'll tell a story. I was here one evening, and there was a guy, and he's like very stringy, strong guy, and he was on the street, and he kind of paces around, and it scared me a little, honestly, when I saw him, and I wondered what he was up to. Then I went to the 7-Eleven on a business walk to talk to the different folks and the businesses about what their needs were and how they solved different issues. And he was in there sweeping the floors. And the 7-Eleven owner said, yeah, he's terrific. Like he comes, he helps out. And so getting to know each other actually can help a lot, and having police officers out there who are getting to know the folks there can help a lot. So
I'm sorry, can I add to that? Because we often get a bad reputation in Cleveland Park that we don't want, we can't stand any homeless people here or any people like that. His name is Christian. We've all welcomed him. Cassandra profiled him in his newsletter. He has been a member of our community, and I agree with you. That's not who we're talking about today. So I'm glad you had a positive interaction, because I agree that's not the issue. But just can I also ask you, because we've talked about Friendship Place and Miriam's Kitchen. So what do they have people who can be on the street? And MPD supposedly has an officer also that is in charge of homelessness, Officer Charles. I haven't seen her. I don't know if she is doing this. So what about those resources as well? If we don't have MPD resources, do we have case management, social service to be walking the beat?
Yeah. So I mean, there is some of that, and I think Miriam's Kitchen may have the contract to do that in this area, in a very large area. We need way more of that. And one of the things that came out of a recent public safety meeting was folks, and this was more up in Van Ness than here, saying we need an NGO that grows out of the community that is delivering services to folks, and that if it's not coming from elsewhere, it should come from here. Judy Ingram is here with the pantry. That's a place that is doing very, very positive work in outreach. We need to figure out ways to do more of that. Just today, it's 7:15 and I have to be at a different meeting at 7:30, but the lobbyist for AOBA, the Apartment and Office Building Owners Association, was talking about receptivity to on-site caseworkers and funding on-site caseworkers. We have a lot of people out there who need a lot of help. There are some people who independent living isn't the right answer, but there's a lot of people who with more help could be doing a lot better, and we're not giving those people the help that they need, and we all lose from that. Figuring out how to get to where we're delivering the services in an appropriate way, I think, is one of the projects that is on the table. I hate to do it, but I really do. I gotta go.
I'm just going to add one thing really, really quick. I'd like to advertise for our community walks. Next one is coming. We will be announcing it soon. So over here on Connecticut Avenue, we appreciate the engagement and the constant communication.
Thank you very much, Captain and Councilor Frumin's on the way out. I just want to go ahead.
Our beat cop was named David Kylan, and he was here for years, until about 3 years ago, when he retired and moved to Japan. In his retirement, he's not been replaced, but he would take care of the Japan injury, the homeless people. He'd go in and out, all this stuff going on with the stores that wasn't occurring because David was on the case. So the trustless is everywhere, but due to all the staffing issues, that he's never been replaced.
Yeah, we discussed the issue of kind of cops on the beat, so to speak, in one of our prior safety meetings, I think last year, and that was the response from the commander was the resources are just so depleted, we don't even have the option right now, so hopefully that'll be an option in the future. Councilor Frumin made a great segue to the Northwest Food Pantry. Judith Ingram, who's come kindly to talk to us. I just want to say, if you're concerned about the neighborhood, what we can do to make it a better place, this is definitely a part of what we need to do. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much. I'll take 2 minutes of your time. We have been open for 2.5 years right down the road in Van Ness. We're in the back of the old Walgreens. We're serving at this point between 200 and 250 families a week, giving them fresh produce, prepared food that's donated from Wegmans,
We have things, we give out cleaning supplies. We're basically providing the necessities for people who are in a position of not really knowing where the next meal is coming from. And so we need your help. You've probably, if you read the Cleveland Park listserv, you've seen our solicitations just about every week. We need in-kind contributions of cleaning supplies, paper bags with handles. We need monetary contributions. We need volunteers. We use about 50 volunteers every weekend. We're open Saturdays and Sundays. Sundays is our distribution day. Saturday is preparation, and then we also are delivering food to about 60 homebound people. 80% of the people we serve live in Ward 3. It's hard to believe that in this ward there is such need, but these are our neighbors. So if anybody has time or resources, we'd really appreciate your help. One footnote to this discussion tonight. We've been working with the DCP's team because, like every place where you have a crowd, you have people waiting in line, boredom, heat, hunger leads to some tension. It's a terrific team. You can contract with them to come to your public events. And they are also doing some trainings. We're doing a training on Friday on something called active bystander intervention. Rebecca is one of our volunteers and she's done it before. And it's something to consider. If you're feeling a little bit helpless, you don't know really how to deal with, we're not talking about gun violence, we're not talking about stabbings, we're just talking about what was described as maybe aggressive panhandling. There is a way to approach the issue, and so I would really suggest that if you're interested, you get in touch with them and come to the pantry. Even if you don't have time to volunteer, come visit. We'd love to see you.
Thank you very much. We're just about time. They're going to throw us out of here. So if you found this meeting helpful and you're concerned about having your neighborhood have a voice in these kinds of issues, please consider joining CPCA if you're not already a member. And as an incentive in that regard, as we mentioned earlier, we're going across the street to 3321 for a drink. If anyone would like to join us, you're very welcome. First drink's on us. Thank you very much again to Alice and Robin. And Robin wanted to one more plug. Hold on one second.
Okay, sorry. For those who still feel like they want to do something, security cameras in your house, there is a rebate program, and I'm going through it right now. Elizabeth, my co-worker, has gone through that. So if you want more information, let me know. Come up to me afterwards.
Sorry, I am the board president at the Crestview condominium. We have a safety issue as well as concerns about a DDOT decision that was recently made. This is in regard to a bus stop relocation that was initially in front of the Washington LA School and is now in front of an 88-unit residential unit sitting right on Wisconsin Avenue. I reached out to the Washington Ballet School today, hoping that they could be here to represent themselves. They did ask me to state that there are safety concerns with their students at the school, with the bus stop now being in a different configuration. It requires the students to cross Porter Street, which they never had to do before. In terms of the condominium, we too are 10 feet from the bus stop. We have had a gentleman expose himself in our entryway. He has peed in front of people trying to enter the building. It is difficult now to navigate into our building because people are now sitting all over our steps, which we knew would happen, but the decision went forward at any rate. We have a couple more concerns even with where the bus stops, which is right in front of our doorway, because there doesn't seem to be the 30 to 50 feet requirement for a bus to pull out. We actually went out and measured it, and it was only 25 feet. So we have written letters I personally wrote a 6-page letter on October 25th, and the prior president wrote a letter on September 6th, all of which has gone unanswered. We haven't gotten one response from the DDOT, not even that they got the letter.
Thank you, Christian Pineiro. Thank you. All right, so I think we're wrapping up. Thank you very much. Come across the street,